When my parents chose my sister's perfect wedding over my life-saving heart surgery, I learned a painful truth about my place in the family. 3 years later, they came to my door asking for help. My father needed the same surgery I had, and they wanted my connections and money. Little did they know I was ready for this moment, and my response would change everything for us. Before I dive into my story, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who took you for granted? If so, hit the like button and subscribe for more stories about discovering your worth. Now, let me take you back to the day my world fell apart. It's a rare congenital heart condition, Natalie. We need to operate within a month. Dr. Reed Bennett's words echoed in my mind as I sat alone in his office. 3 years ago, at 29, I had built a strong career as a marketing executive in Boston. Now my life depended on surgery. At first, symptoms were subtle. Shortness of breath climbing stairs to my apartment, unusual tiredness after jogging, occasional chest pain I blamed on work stress. But when I collapsed during a presentation and was rushed to Massachusetts General Hospital, my condition had become critical. The surgery has an 85% success rate, Dr. Bennett said, looking kindly at me. Delaying it will lower those chances. Significantly each week, I nodded, trying to take it all in. When can we schedule it? He checked his calendar. We have an opening on June 15th. My stomach sank. June 15th was my sister Vanessa's wedding day in Santorini. A date marked on the family calendar for over a year, with countdowns, venue details, flower arrangements, and guest lists. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, phone in hand, rehearsing how to tell my parents. They had already spent nearly $50,000 on Vanessa's destination wedding. My father answered after 3 rings. Natalie, we were just talking about the seating chart. Your mother wants to know if you'd mind sitting with the Hendersons. You know their son from college. I took a deep breath. Dad, I need to tell you and Mom something important. Can you put me on speaker? The conversation began with shock and concern. My mother gasped at the diagnosis while my father asked detailed questions about treatment and recovery. They promised to cut short their pre-wedding trip in Italy and come home immediately. We'll figure this out together, my mother said, her voice trembling. For a brief, hopeful moment, I believed her. 3 days later, they called for a family Zoom. Vanessa joined from her bridal shower in New York, clearly annoyed by the interruption. My parents appeared tense on a hotel balcony in Rome. We've discussed it, my father said, avoiding my gaze. We've made a decision. That's best for everyone, my mother chimed in brightly. Natalie, we spoke with Aunt Judith. She'll stay with you during surgery and take great care of you. The blow hit me hard. You're still going to the wedding? I asked. Vanessa's been planning this for years, my mother said, twisting her pearl necklace. A nervous habit she's had since childhood. We've paid deposits we can't get back. The whole family is counting on being there. This is my heart surgery, I said softly. The doctor said it's life-threatening if postponed. Don't be dramatic. Vanessa rolled her eyes. Aunt Judith raised 4 kids. She knows how to care for people. Besides, I'm only getting married once. My father cleared his throat. The timing is unfortunate, but we'll be back. After the honeymoon to help with your recovery. It's only 2 weeks. 2 weeks, I said flatly. During which I could die. My mother flinched. That's not fair, Natalie. We're trying to be there for both our daughters. No, you're choosing one daughter over the other, I replied, tears welling up. For the first time, I saw where I truly stood. The call ended with tense goodbyes and promises to check in. I sat alone, staring at the wall for hours. Years of being the responsible one. The one who never caused trouble and whose successes were barely noticed, while Vanessa's smallest wins were celebrated loudly. It all made sense now. The day of my surgery dawned with a warm summer sunrise. As nurses prepared me, I scrolled Instagram one last time. My feed was full of photos from Santorini, my sister in a designer gown against white buildings and blue sea, my parents proudly smiling beside her, champagne glasses raised in celebration. The last image I saw before handing my phone to Maya, my best friend who took 2 weeks off to support me, was a family photo captioned, "The perfect day. For our perfect girl Vanessa." As they wheeled me to the operating room, a nurse asked, "Is anyone else coming to wait with your friend?" I closed my eyes, swallowing the lump in my throat. No one else is coming. The anesthesiologist counted backward from 10. A cold sensation spread up my arm. I only made it to 7 before darkness took me, but not before a final thought. What if I don't wake up, and the last thing my parents did was choose a party over saying goodbye? The surgery lasted 12 hours, longer than expected due to complications. I have only fragmented memories, half-consciousness, beeping machines, urgent voices, the metallic taste of blood, and crushing pressure on my chest. Later, Dr. Bennett told me they nearly lost me twice on the table. When I finally woke in recovery, the first face I saw was Maya's. Her curly hair was pulled into a messy bun. Dark circles under her eyes showed she hadn't slept. "Hey, fighter," she whispered, holding my hand gently. "You made it." I tried to speak, but my throat was raw from the intubation. Maya gently offered me ice chips and explained that the surgery had been more complex than the doctors had anticipated, though Dr. Bennett was confident that the defect had been successfully repaired. "Your parents called," she added carefully. "They send their love and prayers. Your mom mentioned they might try to FaceTime you tomorrow during the reception." The medication dulled the physical pain, but it couldn't numb the emotional weight I felt. Aunt Judith stopped by briefly the next day, holding a bouquet and a casserole I wouldn't be able to eat for weeks. She stayed for no more than 45 minutes, glancing at her watch often. "Hate to dash off, dear, but I've got that Alaskan cruise with the church group. We've had it booked for months," she said with a pat on my hand. "I've arranged for a home health aide to check in every day. Your parents are covering it. They do care in their own way." When she left, Maya found me crying silently. Every movement sent pain shooting through my healing chest. "They're not worth your tears," she said firmly, adjusting my pillows. "Focus on getting better. I'm not going anywhere." Maya kept her word. For the next 2 weeks, she became my anchor. She slept in the uncomfortable recliner by my hospital bed, helped the nurses reposition me to avoid bed sores, and fought hard for better pain relief when mine fell short. She even set up a mini workspace in the room, taking client calls between helping me with breathing exercises and guiding me through short hallway walks for rehab. Recovery was brutal. I developed an infection along my sternum that required additional procedures and a strong round of antibiotics that made me violently ill. Each time I vomited, the strain felt like my chest was being torn open all over again. Doctors monitored my heart rhythm closely and installed a temporary monitor, which needed twice daily checks. Throughout all this, my phone remained eerily quiet. My parents sent the occasional text, short, impersonal messages, always ending with thoughts and prayers, as if we were distant acquaintances instead of family. They did send a lavish bouquet with a card signed by the wedding party. Vanessa called once from her honeymoon in Bali. The call lasted exactly 7 minutes. "The wedding was magical," she gushed, without waiting for me to ask. "Brendan's vows had everyone in tears, and the sunset during our first dance was unreal. How are you? The hospital food must be awful." "I almost died, Vanessa," I said quietly. "Don't be dramatic," she replied with a nervous laugh. "Mom said everything went fine. Anyway, I've got to go. We have a couple's massage in 5 minutes. Love you, sis." 3 weeks after surgery, I was discharged with a long list of restrictions and follow-up appointments. My apartment was on the 3rd floor of a walk-up building, completely unmanageable in my condition. Maya found me a ground floor sublet and rallied a few co-workers to move over my essentials. Dr. Bennett surprised me the day after I got home, not just to check my incision, but to keep me company. He brought real coffee. Hospital coffee. Should be illegal, he joked, and sat with me on my small balcony, chatting about books and music instead of my health. His kindness was a soothing balm during a dark time. The home health aide, Patricia, came daily to manage my dressings and monitor my recovery, but the long evenings stretched endlessly. I developed insomnia, haunted by nightmares of being cut open and left behind. 6 weeks after the operation, my parents returned from their European vacation, deeply tanned and weighed down with souvenirs. They visited once. They stayed less than an hour, clearly uneasy in my modest apartment. We brought olive oil from Greece, my mother said cheerfully, avoiding my eyes and the visible scar above my collarbone. And some Santorini wine, for when you're off your meds. The ceremony was beautiful, my father added as though I had asked. Shame you missed it. I looked at them, two people who shared my DNA, but couldn't see me as a person separate from their own needs. Something shifted in me that day. After they left, I blocked their numbers and email addresses. I sent a short message first. I need space to heal, in all ways. Please respect that. That night I sat on the balcony with Maya as the sun dipped. Below the skyline, a blanket around my shoulders despite the warm evening air. I'm done, I told her, my voice stronger than it had been in weeks. I can't keep investing in people who treat me like an afterthought. She nodded, not judging. So what's next? She asked. I looked out at the city lights blinking to life. I rebuild, I said, but this time it's on my terms. 3 years passed faster than I could have expected. My new apartment in Cambridge had a view of the Charles River, a daily reminder of how far I'd come. A promotion to senior. Marketing director at Horizon Media came with a generous raise, finally allowing me to build a home that felt like it was mine in every sense. The walls of my living room, once bare, were now filled with framed memories of the people who became my chosen family. Maya and her fiancé, Zach, building a crooked snowman in my yard last winter. My co-worker, Parker, and his husband, Luis, who taught me how to make paella. And Reed, no longer Dr. Bennett to me, caught mid-laugh during a hike in the White Mountains, taken after I was cleared for strenuous activity. The pale scar on my chest had faded, and now only peeked out when I wore a V-neck. Sometimes I would run my fingers along it, not with regret but with pride. It marked where my new life began. Maya waved a hand in front of my face, pulling me out of my thoughts. You're doing that 1,000-yard stare again. The lasagna's getting cold. I smiled and returned to the moment. Our Friday night dinners had become a treasured tradition. For 3 years, this mismatched group crowded around my table, sharing meals and stories that stitched our lives together. Sorry, I said, taking the pasta dish she passed. Just thinking about tomorrow's support group meeting. It wasn't a lie. 6 months after my surgery, I had founded Heart Forward, a space for others navigating complex medical recoveries. What began as a few informal coffee chats, my darkest days, I stared at them, the ache of old wounds flaring with fresh insult. You want me to let Vanessa move in with me? I said slowly, needing to hear the absurdity out loud. After everything, she's family, my mother said, as if that one word could erase 1,000 failings. And family helps each other. I gave a short laugh, not unkind, just disbelieving. Where was that sentiment when I was in the ICU, or recovering alone in a hospital room, when I was learning to breathe again with tubes in my chest and my parents were in Tuscany? Thomas had the decency to look away, but Eleanor pressed. And we made mistakes, Natalie, we know that, but can't we move forward? Moving forward doesn't mean pretending the past didn't happen, I replied. I'm not angry, not anymore, but I've built something good and peaceful. And Vanessa... I trailed off. The words I wanted to say were harsh, that she hadn't earned a place in my life, but I knew better than to reopen that wound. She's not my responsibility. The silence that followed was heavy. My father stood, clearly sensing the finality in my voice. My mother hesitated, perhaps waiting for me to change my mind, to soften. I didn't. "I hope she finds her way," I said gently, walking them to the door. "But I can't be her solution." Eleanor blinked rapidly, as if fighting tears. "We'll go," she said, voice tight. "But thank you for letting us see you. You look truly happy." "I am," I said simply. When they were gone, I stood at the window for a long moment, watching them descend the stairs slowly, like people who had hoped for redemption and found the door only partly open. Later that evening, Maya arrived with wine and a knowing look. "How bad?" I shrugged. "Not terrible, but not good either. They wanted me to let Vanessa move in." Maya snorted. "Of course they did." I took a long sip of wine, the sunset painting the sky in amber and rose outside. "But I said no," she smiled, raising her glass. "To boundaries. To freedom," I added, clinking mine against hers. And as the first stars appeared in the sky, I felt something settle in my chest. Not pain, not tightness, but clarity. I had survived the surgery, the silence, the grief. Now I was alive in every sense of the word, and I wasn't going back. "That's not an option," I said calmly, explaining that my second bedroom served as my home office. My father leaned in, his voice adopting that familiar tone he used in business meetings. "Natalie, families are meant to support each other in difficult times. Your sister is struggling." The irony of that statement was overwhelming. "Like you supported me during my operation?" I asked. My mother winced. "We made a mistake," she admitted. "We're here to make things right." "Are you?" I replied, watching them closely, "because it seems more like you're here to ask for something." My father let out a heavy breath, exchanged a glance with my mother, and said, "There's something else we need to talk about." He unbuttoned the top of his shirt, revealing a scar nearly identical to mine. "I was diagnosed 6 months ago," he said quietly. "It's the same heart condition you had." The news landed hard, stirring concern in spite of everything. "Have you had surgery yet?" I asked. He shook his head. "That's partly why we're here. My doctor recommended Dr. Leslie Murphy at Boston Memorial, but there's a long wait list. When we mentioned you'd had the same procedure, he brought up Dr. Bennett. He's apparently had excellent results." "We were hoping," my mother added quickly, "you could speak to him on your father's behalf." She hesitated, then continued, "Insurance covers part of the treatment, but not all of it." And there it was. The true reason for their unexpected visit. Not a heartfelt apology or a desire to reconnect, but access to my doctor, to my influence, and very likely to my finances. "The treatment and follow-up care are extremely expensive," my father acknowledged, reading my expression. "Even after liquidating assets, there are significant out-of-pocket costs." I stood, needing space. "Let me get this straight. After ignoring me for 3 years, you want me to ask my doctor to prioritize you and potentially help fund the same surgery you left me to go through alone?" "It sounds harsh when you say it like that," my mother objected. "How else am I supposed to say it?" I asked, my tone controlled, despite the emotion building inside. "We're still your parents," my father said, his voice slipping into its old, authoritative cadence. "Despite everything, that hasn't changed." I looked at them, truly looked, and saw not the powerful figures from my childhood, but 2 aging individuals, more afraid than proud, who still viewed me more as a means to an end than a daughter they'd failed. "I need time to think," I said at last. "There's a lot to process." They left reluctantly. My mother pressed a card with their new number into my hand, extracting a promise that I'd call. When the door closed, I sank onto the couch. The fragile sense of peace I'd spent years rebuilding, suddenly threatened by the past I'd tried so hard to leave behind. The apartment felt changed, as if their visit had disrupted an invisible balance. I walked in circles, eventually grabbing my keys and heading to the river path, where I often sorted through difficult thoughts. The October air was brisk, leaves crackling under my sneakers as I traced a familiar route. 3 miles in, my phone buzzed. A text from Maya. SOS, coming with Thai and wine. She arrived at 7, arms full of takeout and concern. Spill, she said, unpacking boxes on the counter. I recounted everything, watching her face shift from disbelief to outrage. Unbelievable, she muttered, pouring 2 large glasses of wine. 3 years of nothing, and now they show up asking for favors, money and medical strings after what they did. He has the same diagnosis I had, I said, quieter now. I remember how terrifying that was. Maya softened. That's because you're compassionate. Something. They clearly don't share. She handed me a plate of pad thai. So what are you thinking? I'm not sure, I admitted. Part of me wants to tell them to handle it themselves, like I had to, but part of me feels obligated, she finished, because they're family. I nodded, memories surfacing of past sacrifices. My college graduation skipped. For Vanessa's apartment shopping, the writing fellowship dinner cancelled because Vanessa had broken up with her boyfriend. I'd always been the dependable one. The daughter expected to understand why her successes came second. Dr. Klein says I need to recognize the cycle of emotional neglect, I said, referring to my therapist. Helping them now might just reinforce the dynamic where my needs always rank last. What does Reed think? Maya asked. I haven't told him yet. He's on call tonight, I said, nudging my food around. I'm afraid asking him about my father might feel like professional pressure. That night, sleep didn't come easily. I dreamed of my own surgery, the sterile operating room, the anesthesia mask, that terrifying surrender to the unknown. In the dream, I awoke in an empty recovery room, machines beeping, my voice unanswered in the dark. I jolted awake, tangled in the sheets, breath ragged. I spent the early morning hours researching my father's diagnosis. Without surgery, the prognosis was grim. I knew exactly what that ticking clock felt like, even if the person on the other end was Thomas Wilson. The next morning, I called Reed. He listened quietly as I laid out everything. I'd never ask you to compromise your professional ethics, I finished. I just needed someone who understands the medical side. Your father would be evaluated like anyone else, Reed said evenly. If he qualifies for urgent care, it'll be based on clinical need, not connections. If not, he'll remain on the wait list, like all other patients. He paused. Natalie, whatever you decide, whether you help or not, I support you. Just don't let guilt be the reason. I gave a small nod, the tension in my shoulders easing just slightly. Honesty, that word had rarely existed in the vocabulary of our family. My parents sat across from us, my mother clutching her handbag like it was a lifeline, my father avoiding. Eye contact, the weight of illness and pride etched into the lines of his face. No one spoke for a moment. The silence felt less like discomfort and more like a pause before the truth was finally given room to speak. I appreciate you coming, I said, my voice calm, steady. But let's be clear. This isn't a negotiation. This is me setting the terms. My father's mouth tightened, the same expression I remembered from every childhood argument. My mother opened hers to speak, but I held up a hand. I'm going to say everything first, then you can respond. Vanessa leaned in slightly, signaling her support. I laid the folder on the table, the list of resources, the programs, the clinical trial details. There are options for Dad's treatment that don't require my financial involvement. There, Our advocacy services, fully funded trials, and support groups that can help you both navigate this without derailing someone else's life plans. But my mother started. No, I said more firmly. You don't get to interrupt me this time. I turned to my father. I'm not here out of guilt. I'm here because I'm willing to offer help within boundaries, if and only if you acknowledge what happened. The wedding, the surgery, the abandonment. A long silence followed, the kind where everything balances on a breath. My father finally looked at me, really looked. You think we abandoned you? He asked. I don't think it, I said, voice quiet but sharp. I lived it. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. My mother looked down at her hands. I nearly died, and you weren't there, because you were watching Vanessa walk down the aisle in a dress she scheduled, knowing I'd be in surgery. Vanessa inhaled sharply but didn't interrupt. If you want my help now, I continued, there will be no gaslighting, no rewriting history. We name what happened, and we accept that it caused real, lasting harm. I told you, Vanessa said gently to our parents. She deserves that truth. My mother swallowed. We thought you didn't want us. There, you were always so independent. That's not an excuse, I said. That's a justification. I needed you. You chose not to show up. My father's hands clenched on the table. I was wrong, he said hoarsely. We were wrong. The words, though imperfect, landed with the weight of rare sincerity. My mother nodded slowly, eyes shining. I didn't know how to fix it. You start by not denying it happened, I said, by respecting what I need now. I slid another paper forward. If I choose to provide financial help, it will be under a formal agreement, limited scope, limited duration, no assumptions, no guilt trips. My father stared at the page. You'd still help after everything? I'm not doing it for you, I said. I'm doing it because I know who I am, and I won't let what you did turn me into someone I don't recognize. Vanessa reached under the table and briefly squeezed my hand. That's what I meant, she said softly. You were always stronger than all of us. The conversation continued. Hard truths, painful admissions, boundaries laid out with the precision of a blueprint. It wasn't warm, it wasn't healing, not yet, but it was honest. When we finally stood to leave, my parents looked older somehow, quieter, maybe not changed, but finally confronted with who their daughter had become. Vanessa walked with me to the parking lot. Whatever happens next, she said, I want to rebuild something real, if you're open to it. I'm open, I said, unlocking my car, just not unguarded. That's fair. As I drove home, I didn't feel victorious, but I felt whole. My future was still mine. My foundation, built brick by careful brick, still stood. And this time, I'd drawn the blueprints. This is not about revenge. It's about accountability. My mother flinched as if struck. My father sat back, arms crossed, his jaw clenched in silent protest. I could see him grappling with the loss of control, the realization that the daughter he once commanded through guilt and silence now sat across from him, self-possessed, prepared and unmoved by sentiment. Vanessa broke the silence first. I support Natalie's decision, she said firmly. It's generous, considering everything. My mother turned to her, lips parted in disbelief. You're siding with her? I'm siding with what's right, Vanessa replied, and for once, I'm not letting fear or family pressure keep me from saying so. The room grew quiet again, not with tension, but with finality. The battle lines that had once been so blurred were now crystal clear. This wasn't a rebellion, it was a boundary. I stood slowly, gathering my folder. You can take time to review the documents. I suggest you speak to the financial counselor before making any decisions. I'll wait to hear from you, through the mediator. You're really doing this, my father said, almost to himself, after everything. I am, I replied. Because this time, I choose myself. I turned to Vanessa. You ready? She stood too, offering a quiet nod of support. As we walked toward the exit, my mother called out softly, Natalie! I paused, not turning around. We did the best we could. I inhaled deeply. Then it's time to let me do the best I can. For me. We left the restaurant in silence, the warm sunlight outside a strange contrast to the cold, emotional terrain we had just crossed. As we stepped onto the sidewalk, Vanessa let out a shaky breath. I've never seen you like that, calm, clear. I've never felt like this, I admitted. I finally feel free. She looked at me, hopeful. So what now? Now, I said, pulling my sunglasses on, I start living without the weight. That evening, I sat on my balcony again, watching the city lights flicker on. I didn't know whether my parents would accept the terms. I didn't know if healing was possible. But for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for their permission or their apology. I had chosen my peace, and that was more than enough. Ridiculous, my father snapped, his fragile appearance giving way to the authoritative figure I remembered. We came to you in good faith, and you're responding with spreadsheets and conditions. 3 years ago, I said, allowing some of the pain to surface, I went into cardiac surgery knowing my family chose a party over being with me. I rebuilt my life without your help or interest. I created a foundation to help families facing medical crises. I found people who love me unconditionally. I took a steadying breath, which brings me to my final point. I withdrew the last item from my folder, a brochure. This is Heart Forward, the foundation I built. We've helped over 200 families navigate complex cardiac care. We offer financial assistance, counseling, emotional support. No patient faces surgery alone. My parents looked at the brochure, confused. Dad, I continued, you're welcome. To apply to the assistance program. The application is simple. All decisions are made by an independent committee based on need. You want your father to apply for charity from his own daughter's organization? My mother asked, incredulous. I want him to receive help through a system designed to ensure dignity and fairness, I replied. Just like everyone else, my father pushed back from the table, his face red. This is not what family does. This is what my family does, I said softly. My chosen family respects boundaries, acknowledges harm, supports healing, not just physically but emotionally. So that's it, my mother demanded, tears now streaming. You're punishing us forever for one mistake? I'm not punishing you, I said gently. I'm offering help, but on terms that protect my well-being. The choice to accept it, that's yours. My father stood abruptly. Eleanor, we're not going to beg. My mother hesitated, torn, looking between us. Thomas, maybe we should consider... No. His voice cut her off, sharp and final. As they gathered their things, he turned to Vanessa. Are you coming? Vanessa straightened her shoulders. No, I'm staying with Natalie. His face hardened. Then don't expect our help when this new job of yours doesn't work out. I won't, Vanessa said simply. When the door finally closed behind them, the private dining room fell silent. Vanessa and I sat together, the weight of decades shifting between us. Are you okay? She asked after a long pause. I thought for a moment. Yeah, for the first time in a long time, I think I really am. 3 months later, I stood beside Maya in a small chapel, adjusting her veil before she walked down the aisle to marry Zach. Through the window, I could see Reed saving me a seat in the front row. Nervous? I asked, smoothing a curl from her face. She grinned. Not even a little. Some things you just know are right. As maid of honor, I'd helped plan every detail of this day, celebrating the friend who had been more family to me than my blood relatives ever were. My parents had stayed silent since that final conversation. I'd heard, however, that my father had, somewhat surprisingly, enrolled in the clinical trial at Mass General. He hadn't applied for help from my foundation. Pride, apparently, still won. Vanessa and I, on the other hand, had begun rebuilding something real. Weekly coffee meetups had turned into dinners and deep talks about our childhood, our pain, and our futures. Heart Forward continued to grow. We'd just partnered with 3 major hospitals and approved a new case, a 62-year-old man with the same condition my father and I share. I hadn't chosen the case personally. The committee handled it. But when I signed the approval, something inside me finally settled. "It's time," the coordinator whispered, cueing the musicians. I caught Reed's eyes across the chapel. His warm smile, steady and full of promise, mirrored everything I had built since waking up alone in that hospital bed. Later, during the reception, Reed pulled me onto the dance floor. His hand rested lightly over my scar through the silk of my dress. "Have I told you today how extraordinary you are?" he whispered. I smiled, thinking about the journey, the scars, the silence, the strength. "I never would have chosen this path," I said, "but I'm grateful for where it led me." We swayed to the music, surrounded by people who had shown up when it mattered most. My chosen family. I didn't feel broken anymore, not even healed. I felt transformed, stronger at the broken places. Some people spend their whole lives seeking approval from those who will never truly see them. I learned a different lesson. True family is defined not by blood, but by who shows up when it matters most. What about you? Have you ever had to create boundaries with family members who took you for granted? How did you balance self-care with family obligations?